Talking Zombies, No Laughing by MeliaeCinisNMors. Chapter 2. Dead Body Reported. He couldn't even last for months, Jose thinks with boredom as he stares down at the body of Mori, who it seems was murdered while alone in the infirmary. There is a sliver of metal sticking out from the side of the body's head, and from the familiar shape of it, Jose can easily say it's one of Mori's own scalpels. How ironic. Honestly, Dulce had only come to find out if the doctor-turned-mafia boss had that lethal poison done and ready yet. But seeing as how he couldn't spot anything new laying around even remotely similar to what Dulce would expect poison to look like, he was left in his usual mood. Slightly disappointed, but otherwise not surprised. Life just seems to hate him like this. Though, he was feeling intrigued. It was hardly out of the blue for a boss of any kind, let alone the likes of a criminal organization such as the Port Mafia, to be targeted for assassination, especially with the death of the previous boss and rise of a new one. That has come with a cacophony of issues and stress all around. However, Dulce found so many things wrong with this. It was too early for word to have spread about the ascension of a new Port Mafia leader. Mori has been keeping everything tight-lipped, killing off anyone even showing the smallest bit of insubordination, and grunts working around the clock to make sure nothing got in or out of the Mafia without Mori's awareness, which leads to a likely scenario. Whoever the assassin was, or whomever sent them, was greatly unaware of the recent development, as was the point, and presumed Mori to be the old man who had nearly brought Yokohama to ruin. There was always a chance that the killer was actually someone linked to the Mafia, though. A possible uprising against the new revival of what the Port Mafia should have originally been led as, due to conflicting ideals. But with all the precautions Mori and his top executives took to prevent this kind of situation, with Dazai's help nonetheless, only something of an unforeseen circumstance could have gave way to a crack in all their planning. An admittedly obvious crack that Dulce maybe should have given some thought to beforehand. Damn, all my wasted days of working hard for nothing, Dulce bemoans as he pokes a foot at the corpse. Ugh, and there's bound to be even more problems now. I really should just kill myself. Except, he's curious. After all, it's one thing to target someone with such high standing like Mori, and it's another to succeed so amazingly, leaving no trace behind, especially with the clinic being one of the most guarded and underground areas of the entire Mafia. Dulce wants to know who could have possibly pulled it off. But that will have to wait for another day, he thinks solemnly. Sighing, Dulce slips his phone out of his pocket and quickly dials Old Man Hirotsu's number. Pushing the time Dulce's been in the Mafia, even without being an official member, Hirotsu definitely holds the most of his meager trust. The phone doesn't even ring, immediately having the call answered. Dazai-kun. Hirotsu-san, Mori-san is dead. Body found in the infirmary. There's a sharp inhale. An autopsy crew will be sent immediately. Be discreet, Hirotsu-san, Dazai interrupts with a serious tone, and gather the executives for a meeting. Do not disclose the boss's death. When shall the meeting be set? Hirotsu seems to have steeled himself after the reeling news, reinforcing Dazai's respect for the man. He's a good worker indeed. Schedule jets for Executive Kilono and Executive Naman to arrive promptly by tomorrow evening. The meeting should be set for their arrival. Understood. With that, the man hangs up, and Dulce is left in silence, once again, with the dead body of his doctor. The grunts Hirotsu sends will likely be there within 5 minutes. It feels both unsettling and sardonic, looking at the body. Mori had, unfortunately, been eerily similar to Dazai. With their analytical and deliberate way of thinking, to simply overall look, both could have been passed off as relatives by any other person. The thought makes Dazai feel sick. He hates himself, being one of the few things he can hold such strong emotions for. Everything about his inhuman nature, his lack of moral, the darkness that is his ability, all of it is an anomalous figure of nature. He is an anomalous figure of nature, almost like a detachment from what should be a normal human reality. Mori is similar to Dazai. Dazai hates himself. Dazai hates Mori for reminding himself of why he is not human. He hates Mori, so he's glad the bastard is dead. Shaking his head to dispel his thoughts, and quickly realizing he doesn't want to deal with the examination crew, Dazai leaves the room. He spares no more glances or thoughts for the dead thing behind him. He navigates through the familiar hallways, turning this way and that, going up 2 small flights of stairs and going through an annoyingly heavy door. The whole time, Dazai has plans and all his cataloged information racing through his head for tomorrow's meeting. And he will be attending, there's no doubt about that. The only trouble is deciding how he should manage everything now that the fresh, new boss is dead and unable to delegate the shaky power the executives hold. Dazai exits the main building, finally, taking his time now to stroll toward the next one while he continues to ponder. Would that work? Or maybe... No, wait, I should try the process documentations. Would Koya-san be interested? The informants need to be settled, though. It takes several minutes before Dazai realizing he is standing still. In front of him are the large doors to the catalogs he needs. Blinking, he pulls on the handles, stepping into the rather large and crowded room. Several people are sitting around, sorting through a multitude of things he concludes are mostly useless. They all take a glance at him, but immediately get back to work. Dazai doesn't need to say anything either, surveying the changes from his last visit over 2 months ago, before starting right towards a group of double-shelf file holders. His eyes skim over the contents of each one steadily, eventually resting upon one of the closer ones. It didn't hold the most paper, but it was a close thing, and Dazai resigned himself to the tedious task of going through each paper. He picks the file holder up, shakes out the papers into his other hand, several falling to the floor, but he ignores them, and finds a less messy area to begin his work. 13:41 is what the clock reads. Dazai wants to jump out a window. Sadly, the walls are blank in the hallway, with only the elevator leading up there, and the office with doors that have yet to open, holding the closest panes of glass. Dazai sighs loudly, trying to get a reaction out of everyone else. Most of them have none, though a man who Dazai presumes to be one of the body examiners for Mori smirked in such a way that showed he was annoyed. Dazai decides to sigh again, and again, and again. Does the boss's ward feel impatient, or is he just trying to disturb every other occupant here? The man eventually asks in a raspy yet snarky tone. No one else moves an inch. Good. Seems he has his underlings in line, Dazai thinks blandly. No need to correct past and present terms. Are you saying it can't be both? Dazai replies with a dead smile. Hoo hoo hoo. I'm not saying anything. I'm asking a question. The man, though he could maybe pass for a young adult, gives off a rather disturbing laugh. Or maybe it's a cough. Dazai isn't all that sure. Then you're asking if it can be one or the other, meaning it can't be both. In that case... He pretends to think for a moment, even closing his eyes. Neither. The young man blinks, smirk only attached to his face now due to confusion. But the look is wiped off quickly, a halt sneer replacing it. My, what a brat. Dazai remains smiling. Hoo hoo, I try. A tense silence follows over the hallway, and Dazai accepts the win. He looks over at the clock, even though he is consciously already aware of how much time has passed. 13:58. Dazai lets himself fall into the void of his mind, visibly unchanging, he knows. During that time, he feels every individual and every heartbeat his body produces. The ache in his right arm becomes both more intense yet numb with his awareness. Everything seems to feel so cold. nothing so strange yet normal for him. Heels and shoes step out of the silent elevator, clicking as they near. Daze lifts his head, regaining his focus like the naturalness of breathing. The clock reads 1400 exactly. How pretentious. Walking with the most serious and boring faces Daze has ever had the disprivilege of seeing are the two executives Mori, for some reason, put into high positions. Technically, neither of them had even really been an official part of the Mafia. Mori just had prior experience working with them in the war and afterward. Hirotsu, the creepy man, and the handful of autopsy grunts gathered with Daze all bow. Sighing internally, he follows suit. Koyozaki is the only one who remains stagnant, seeing as she is also an executive, though it is obvious she is tense, similar to her counterparts. The three remain silent, watching dangerously as Hirotsu stands and has the guards open the large doors. Everyone walks inside, Daze in the very back of the group. Chairs are picked and seated at a long table that stands in the Port Mafia boss's main office. Sounds of shuffling feet and other sorts filling the large room as they get filled accordingly. Then there is silence. Daze rakes his eyes boredly across the room as no one moves to speak. The lackeys because of low standing, and the executives due to a lack of understanding of the situation. Obviously, not much changed. Still a large dark room with a long table. It gets set out for meetings such as this, and a desk and chair at the very opposite end of the room. The windows which Daze had been hoping would be clear are, in fact, covered. For security, even more so right now. A shame, though. I really wanted to jump out the window this time. Or at least see if I could break it, Daze thinks glumly. He couldn't break the window, he knows, but it was a pleasing thought. The boss is running late. Nauman is the first to break the silence, his statement more questioning than anything. Immediately, everyone's focus shifts to him, even though no one actually moves. Hirotsu stands and draws the attention away from the executives. Daze feels the hypothetical air of the room grow denser. Clearing his throat, Hirotsu calmly states the purpose of the meeting. Yesterday, Monday at 5:15, leader Mori Ogai was reported dead. An outcry is heard from all executives, but they're the only ones, of course, everyone else obviously aware, so it comes as no shock to Daze. The executives still demand answers, sadly. Give us every detail, the colonel states harshly. Hirotsu doesn't even blink as he continues. The first person to be notified, me, in response to a call received from the boss's head research informant, Daze Osamu. Stares that could shrink armies within an instant fall upon him. Autopsy personnel was received minutes after being called, under a sharp medical team led by Doc. Daze glances at the man, Doc, and finds the creep to be smirking at him. He returns to stare for less than a minute before turning back to Hirotsu. So I will now be handing over the lead to Doc-san, who will give the report found on the boss's autopsy. Hirotsu finishes, nodding over to Doc before sitting down in a seat. It seems the executives know not to interrupt, staying silent as the meeting without their boss continues. Doc huffs, or maybe laughs, Daze still isn't sure, before gripping his IV drip and standing. The papers in front of him remain untouched and not once looked at as he gives his team's findings. Most noticeable was a penetrating head injury caused by scalpel we have found, leader's own medical kit. However, and what I find to be most interesting, is the high velocity at which the weapon seems to have penetrated the skull. Several fractures were found connecting to the wound, spanning 1 inches between all of them. The scalpel pierced every tissue, and the boss was likely killed instantly, the man finishes, smirk on his face as he sits back down. Everything is silent as he and the medical team wait for everyone else to process the information. The only factor that really piqued Daze's own interest was the presumed speed the scalpel would have been thrown with. Then again, with all the information I've gathered, it makes sense, he thinks, somewhat bored by now. The colonel is the first to snap out of it.
Where exactly is the medical department located? This knowledge could mean a traitor, a spy, infiltration, assassination, usurpation, or a mix of any of these possibilities. The man takes a moment to pause, looking over at Daze for a long minute before he continues, eyes remaining on him the whole time. We should also be informed as to this Daze's information regarding his involvement. Daze doesn't bother giving the man much attention, though he does remain holding his gaze even with the silent accusation thrown at him. It's hardly out of pocket either. In fact, Daze would have been even more disappointed if these buffoons didn't consider him a possible suspect. Still, Daze knows he's not the killer, unfortunately, and would rather just focus on finding the damn meeting. And seeing as no one else is going to step in, I guess I have to end it myself. Ugh. To answer your first question, Morison's show some respect clinic is under the jurisdiction of Dakun and the rest of the medical staff, so I can't say anything regarding the clinic. The colonel gives him a sneer. As for why I was there, it's simple. Morison had given me permission to visit whenever I want, so I did, and now here we are. Daze displays his hands in the air, tilting his head and smiling. The only female executive, Koyo Ozaki, clicks her tongue. She sends a rather vicious glare at him before speaking. That is hardly an alibi, though I'm sure you know that, and regardless of what the boss had given you permission to do, you wouldn't have stepped foot in the medical area without a reason. You don't know me very well, Koyo-san. His eyes hold mirth as he speaks, tone settling it into something much like Mori's would whenever he wanted to regain a room's control. As he expected, it has the intended effect. Koyo, along with everyone else at the table, recoils just slightly. Koyo's eyes narrow, tone shifting to try and match his. Insubordinate child, do not try to act like you have any standing here, she sneers. A protege you may be, but you hold no experience or participation in anything real. Your only know-how is within the confines of the boss's office, merely a right hand in training, and with him dead, you hold the only testimony as to what happened, if it isn't already you, Executive Koyo. She holds up her hand. Naman shuts up. Now then, Daze-kun, share with us your intentions and actions leading up to you calling Hirotsu-san immediately. I will, but before that, the executive grabs for her katana, glaring at him. We should discuss the intentions and actions of the Port Mafia's enemy, or the possible enemy at least. Koyo doesn't blink, though she is still clearly surprised. The look has quickly wiped off her face, though, and she shares a glance with the other executives. Daze remains silent and waiting. Executive Naman is the only one to speak next, shifting his attention between Daze and his cohorts. Is your information relevant to the current situation? Daze nods. Another not-so-secretive glance is shared. You may proceed. Of course, sir. Daze takes the papers he had placed on his lap onto the table. He doesn't need them. Everything he needs to know is already in his brain. But he wants to get this whole problem done and over with as soon as possible. So he has his evidence on hand. To start, Port Mafia's enemies. There are numerous ones in every form on nearly every continent. So I broke down which ones fit the assassination success, using the clues of 1. Where the medical clinic is located, 2. The cause of death, 3. The lack of visual or physical evidence, and 4. The timing. From there, I narrowed down to, eventually, just one enemy. From what I reminded Executive Kolono-san of just a minute ago, the whole underground medical staff and facility of the Port Mafia is kept under lock and key. It is difficult to find without complete authority, and also hard to navigate. Of course, this would make it seem like there is a spy or traitor within our midst. Correct, the executives say simultaneously. Daze nods. However, very little of our medical staff hold abilities. Even with formal combat training, the speed at which the scalpel was thrown is abnormal for typical human strength. Not to mention how it must have been done swiftly for the boss to show no signs of fight much less knew an enemy was there at all. And of course, from what I saw just a little over 5 minutes before Doxon's team inspected the boss, his blood was still flowing. Barely. So he would have been killed quite nearly the time you showed up, Koyu states, eyes narrowing. Instead of Dazai, Doc is the one who replies back to her, "Hoo. Aside from the cameras, there is no evidence whether or not Dazai-kun was there when the boss died. Certainly, rigor mortis had yet to set in when we arrived, and the kill was fresh. However, any enemy capable of killing a port mafia boss in his own quarters without resistance is bound to at least have some tactical thinking. Why not time a murder when a Werelaki will arrive just a minute later?" Everyone at the table seems to pause, thinking it over. Ultimately, they seem to see the medical supervisor's point, if their grim faces were to say anything. "That makes sense," Nauman concedes warily. The colonel snorts. "It's a chance. Have the cameras even been checked?" "I contacted an informant to look over the footage," Dazai says smoothly, form still not having moved an inch since he stood. "The report on them should be sent to Hirotsu-san now." The man doesn't startle. He just reaches into his pocket and pulls out a small flip phone. With permission from the executives, he looks over the message. While Dazai can take a guess as to what the results showed, and nearly what he already predicted, the cameras weren't anything he'd looked over the day and night before. Everyone's focus is on Hirotsu as he once again stands, looking over everyone in the room before he finally reveals the camera evidence. The cameras were tampered with during the time of the murder. The only footage it shows would be the boss that unnaturally cuts into showing the scene Dazai-kun walked in on, including Dazai-kun himself. The informant reports that Dazai-kun was not shown entering the room. He is there for exactly 1 minute 21 seconds before making a call, most likely myself. After the call ends, Dazai-kun remains in the clinic for 4 minutes 38 seconds until he leaves. Doxon, all attendants with him, arrive shortly after. During the whole time, Dazai-kun was not shown moving around the room, touching the body, or making any other calls. That is all. With that, he bows and sits back down. Dazai nods, quickly taking up where he left off, while also keeping anyone else from speaking. Now, that brings up another point for the murderer. They have resources, if not a full-scale team, that are working in tandem to take down the port mafia. Like I said previously, there is no visual or physical evidence regarding the kill itself. Even with footage stacked against me, nothing proves I did it, or did not do it. So, no evidence. Koyu clicks her tongue. "Get to the point," he huffs. "I am. Anyways, as Doxon suggested, the enemy could very well plant a suspect so the port mafia will collapse in on itself. This I know due to the timing of it all. Aside from the obvious fact that Mori-san was a new boss and the shaky grounds caused by this, there are many people all around the world who want either control over or the destruction of our demon city. Yet little have the resources and abilities to accomplish what this group obviously did. You believe it's an enemy organization?" the colonel questions with a cold face. Dazai hums in reply, if only to tick the military officer off slightly. "Yep. And I've narrowed it down to exactly one group with whom the pieces all fit. Specifically, with their knowledge of the port mafia hierarchy shift and their ability to take advantage of it." He pauses, seeing all the occupants at the table straighten just slightly, their eyes boring with curiosity, wariness, animosity, and resolution. "Who?" Dazai, smirking, answers Hirotsu's question while looking at all the villainous people. "The DGSS.